Wow. Wow. Today is a big day. I'll turn that sound off there. Hi, hello everybody. Hello. Thank you for watching. Today's a big day. The 8th of September 2022. Queen Elizabeth II has passed away, has died. Immediately following her death, her son, the heir, King Charles III, is now the monarch of England. King Charles III is the monarch of England. What we're watching are I'm not quite sure why we're watching this gate, but it's Balmoral Castle, where apparently the Queen died. So, more than likely they're waiting for... they expect something to pass through these gates, I guess. Pretty sad. But anyway, the purpose of this stream right now is to essentially watch history, watch what happens as much as we can together. And with that in mind, I do want to post the join link, so anyone can come in and talk about this event, any other events, whatever you like. Let me post it. It's pretty much a somber day today. For some, for most maybe. For me, for sure. So, what I am going to do is I'm just going to let the Reuters stream run. Wait for people to join. Anyone is welcome to join. Just click the link at the top of the description in the chat, or click the link at the top of the chat, or the side chat, or click the link in the description. I'll keep the link. I'm going to keep the room open for a while. There will probably be times when somebody would like to be admitted and there's no response from me. I'm probably away from my keyboard during that time. So if you do not, if you are not immediately or soon admitted into the room, please bear with me, as I might be away from the keyboard. So it looks like there's just the press people outside the gate having a chat amongst themselves.
is, I could push, I'm only up for who's going to be darker since I last looked at that, but they've got 18 games. There's always going to be an issue. I've been...
No, you're absolutely right. She was well quick.
I've got more like... When I do have an ace, it's 3. So yeah, which is perfect. You're not going right.
So some of the questions I have is, or one of the big questions I have is, will Scotland, during King Charles III's reign, will Scotland secede, leave the United Kingdom, or become independent? You know what? I don't see it. I don't see it happening. Mainly because of the population of Scotland is so small. And also, I think much more important than Scottish independence is the reunification of Ireland. Northern Ireland is occupied by the English, by the British, and it is time for Northern Ireland to be returned to the Irish. So Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, will encompass the whole island of Ireland. If that makes any sense. But it looks like it's early days. Early days yet for the pomp and ceremony. They're all just they're gearing up. I have an idea that this is going to run into sort of an evening. It's going to stop, and then things are going to begin again early in the morning. I will try. I'm in Western Canada, but I will try. I'll try and be up for pomp and ceremony time, so we can all share in this together. But as you can tell by the policeman, things are slow. The policeman on the screen, things are slow. We've been running for, 12 minutes? 11 minutes odd? And not a hell of a lot has happened. My main goal is, of course, to get the room going to talk about this and other things.
You'll get here. I'm going to quickly go watch some people. Oh, I don't like seeing these emails. Pizzas in the kitchen. Oh, great. Enjoy that. On the way. I got taken off the A9
Yeah.
really early.
I think that was the reason for that.
Of which point I stupidly haven't sorted sheep or anything. Ended up having to put the
Basically after Perth. After Perth. Yeah, after Perth. I didn't think it was a massive deal, but there's obviously something going on the other way. Well, he said something.
Oh no, it was an hour and 11, I think it was.
Oh, wow. That's good. That's good. That's terrible.
Right, it sounds like Foxconn.
Oh, you're doing it for us? Oh, right. I thought you were just coming to the show.
No.
Oh, great. Perfect. Does he need to feed it? Use my van. Well, my laptop's actually already plugged in, so in theory you could get on there, but maybe when you're done, you switch places. You know how to use an FS7, so it's not going to be that easy. It's not stand there to do it. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the best thing. Yeah.
There's a gallery. They're going to record it. Record the thing.
Call it what? Right. Is that because they're easy? Here and then, in that case, you don't need to be in shot.
Yeah, they're looking at it.
No, I mean, if Harry comes, you need to move out of the way.
But they've got a pool feed at that shot.
I know.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why I have to get it.
Is that what they told you?
No?
No. I think we just carry on talking. They can cut to the pool feed, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought. Is there any way you can talk to Martin about that?
No, I don't think it's probably. It sounds like it's not. So.
And the other problem is it's about to get really dark.
Yeah.
The new Prime Minister is one of the last people to see the Queen here in Balmoral. It was only on Tuesday that we were into that transition of power between Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, as Liz Truss became the 15th Prime Minister of Her Majesty's reign. The first Prime Minister short time ago outside Downing Street, Liz Truss's new residence in London as Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Dermot. And you know, it's interesting that I was just listening in my ear to those cheers which rang out outside Buckingham Palace. 3 years I heard them in my ear, and it was so incredibly moving because we're going to see a lot of formality and
Hi there.
we're going to see a lot of sadness, a lot of ceremony. You know, little moments like that.
Sorry, I was just switching my television off. How are you, Sydney? Good, good. Yeah, I feel very sad. I feel very sad. Yeah. When I saw the Queen on Tuesday, when she was receiving Liz Truss, I thought she looks very frail. You know, you see the photographs of her. I can't believe she was doing her duties right up till Tuesday. It's amazing. Amazing woman. Thursday, yeah, because she had to accept Boris Johnson's resignation and then accept Liz Truss as the new Prime Minister, her 15th Prime Minister. And they had to travel to Balmoral. She goes to Balmoral every summer anyway, but she had extended. There was news that she extended her visit, and I did wonder, will we ever see her back in London? So, an amazing woman. Anyway, King Charles III. Wow. I did wonder if he would change his name to Philip after his father, because apparently they were saying that every new regent, when there's a new regent, they can choose to change their name. It's happened in history, but it's been confirmed he's sticking with Charles. Yes. Yeah. Oh, momentous day in history. Well, for United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. It's very quiet at the moment. Apparently her body is going to remain at Balmoral. I think possibly tomorrow, and then they're transporting her by train, which I think is unusual because I thought they might have flown the body. But they're transporting her body by train to Waverley Station in Edinburgh, and then there's going to be a funeral procession up the Royal Mile in Edinburgh to St Giles Church.
Mm-hmm.
And then she'll be transported back to London.
So what's the plan, say, for the rest of from now on? Are they going to just halt everything for the night and then resume in the morning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think that's what it's going to be.
Well, I certainly... Carry on.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, carry on. I just...
Yeah, I live in Dundee, which is a city not far from Aberdeen. I'm actually from Aberdeen.
Where is Balmoral Castle?
Aberdeenshire.
Oh, so you're not far away. Well, how far is Dundee from Aberdeen?
I'd have to Google it. It's quite far.
That's quite far. Okay.
It's a train journey. I think it's I would say about a 3-hour train journey.
Mm-hmm.
2 to 3 hour train journey. But I think there might be a funeral procession through Dundee as well. I think that's the plan.
So her body's not going to be taken to London?
Not immediately, no. There's going to be a funeral procession in Scotland, in Dundee and later Edinburgh, and then she's going to be transported to London.
Oh, this is going to take a whole bunch of time.
A few days, I would imagine, yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. She's always very fond of Scotland. In fact, I'd heard that her wishes were to be buried in Scotland, but I don't think that will happen. I can't remember where Prince Philip was buried, but I'm sure her wishes would be to be buried.
They'd probably be next to each other.
To him. Yeah. There was one thing that struck me, though. You know, all the Boris Johnson debacle when he was partying during lockdown.
Yeah.
And all that scandal, and Prince Philip had died during that time.
Right.
And there was this camera shot of the Queen sitting on her own in the, I think it was the church for the service, sitting on her own in this long bench while Boris Johnson was partying it up.
Not a good look.
Not a good look, no. And she just struck this lonely, frail figure for being the monarch.
Yeah.
You know, the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. She looked very human, very frail, sort of mourning the loss of her husband.
Right. Oh, it's just this sad. So the live stream has ended. Whoopie-doo.
Oh, has it?
Yeah, no
Right.
biggie. Yeah, it does. So I'll just do that.
Oh, I see Hillary's emails in the chat.
Hillary's emails, come on in. It's time to talk.
So how's things with you, Sydney? What's been happening?
Well, I have been away from home since beginning to the middle of August. And what I'm doing is I am house and dog sitting for clients who go on holiday for extended periods of time, and they need their house looked as if well, the animals also sort of hang around, right? They have animals, and they want their house to look like it's been lived in, and they want the animals to be taken care of, and that's what I do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I was just thinking if Reuters has stopped your live stream, Sky's live at the moment, Sky News.
Sky News. Let me see if I can get Sky News. I don't know.
I've just been watching all the live streams.
Yeah, just sometimes.
I've been watching the crowd.
Here in Canada, sometimes we don't get what you guys. We don't get what you guys get. So Sky News.
Yeah, live. Look it up on YouTube.
I am. But
I think they're focused on what's happening at Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, Sky News is not live on YouTube.
Is it not? Let me see what I've been looking at then.
She's not live, at least not in YouTube Canada. Oh, but I might be able to get. Oh yeah, give me a link. That would be great.
I've got Watch Sky News Live.
Yeah, it probably won't work, but I'll give it a try.
There's a few things live at the moment.
Well, let me look here to see if I can find the same thing, because Canada's
also
gonna have
ITV News.
Canada's gonna be pretty into it, you'd think. Live stream, here we go.
I would imagine, yeah. Like Australia.
Yeah. I'm just gonna write in, do a search. Queen Elizabeth. Let's see what she got live. Oh, there we go. I've got something.
Her reign spanned 12 Canadian prime ministers, from Pierre Trudeau's famous pirouette to Canada's second Prime Minister Trudeau.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister of Canada, for making me feel so old.
The pronoun.
What's that?
Hillary's emails is saying that they can't get their mic to work.
Who can't get the mic to work?
Hillary's emails.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, she said that.
something-
Yeah, you said that before.
I wasn't sure if it was male, female, so my apologies.
I'm not sure either, to be honest with you. Okay, I'm going to share that.
Hillary's emails confirmed male. So
Okay. I kind of thought that. All right, let's take it away, babies.
I like the name, by the way, Hillary's emails.
Her Majesty made 22 trips to Canada,
You got it?
more than any other country.
This country felt like a home, away from home.
Many credit the Queen's personal popularity for the monarchy's survival, but at times she struggled to hold the family together. 3 of her children divorced. And after the death of Princess Diana in 1997, the Queen faced criticism for failing to join the public outpouring of grief. In February 2020, Diana's youngest son, Prince Harry, and his wife Meghan retired from royal duties, dealing a blow to the palace. And a couple of months later, the royal family lost another member. Prince Philip died peacefully at Windsor Castle at the age of 99. At his funeral, a scaled-down affair in the COVID-19 pandemic, the Queen sat alone in the pew, a widow after 73 years of marriage. But within days of her husband's death, Her Majesty was back to work, holding virtual royal audiences due to the pandemic, and as always, keeping calm and carrying on. One of the last times the family appeared all together was to mark her Platinum Jubilee, celebrating 70 years on the throne. The 96-year-old was forced to miss some of the party due to health issues. And despite scandals surrounding some of her children, grandchildren, even the British Prime Minister, the Queen, as ever, seemed to rise above, making a surprise appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. There by her side, 3 generations of future kings, all heirs to the British throne. Her legacy will endure, but for a woman who steered the royal family through 3/4 of a century, it's hard to imagine this place without her. Jeff Semple, Global News, London.
We are now joined over the phone by former Governor General of Canada, David Johnston. And Mr. Johnston, I really appreciate, first of all, you joining us. You've met the Queen several times, so I'm sure you are mourning today in your own way. We'd love, though, first to hear your reflections today of the Queen and what you remember the most about her.
A day of celebration of really a remarkable personality. I don't think history will see her kind again. Not simply being the longest serving British monarch in 1,000 years of parliamentary history, but really the uniqueness of this remarkable person during challenging periods of history during her 70 years on the throne. And I think the thing that stands out most to me is the concept of leader as servant. You quoted earlier in your broadcast her vow when her father had died and she realized that she would be taking up these duties for which she had not been prepared, as other expectant heirs to the throne had been prepared, and it would be duty through her lifetime. And she certainly represented that in such a remarkable way, and it was duty, service, honor to the service of the people who were part of her kingdom, so to speak. And we'll remember that. I'll remember her also for remarkable graciousness and a down-to-earth quality that was most endearing and very engaging. The occasions when Sharon and I had to meet with her and her husband, we always were put at ease and were just struck by the practicality of them, her great interest in Canada, curious enormously. When we first visited them in August of 2010, the custom is that an incoming Governor General and spouse visit the Queen, usually at Buckingham Palace for tea and receive the oath of office and the medals and so on. But we were very fortunate. They invited us to come in August, which was 3 months before I was to be sworn in. And they spent August and early September at Balmoral Cottage, Balmoral Castle, which is very, very relaxed. And it was a wonderfully relaxed weekend, at the end of which she said, "I do read letters, you know." And I said, "Well, Your Majesty, I will write you letters, and when they become dull and boring, I will cease and desist." So I followed the practice of writing to her every 3 to 6 months. As a matter of fact, the last letter I wrote last week, as it turned out, and I was just bringing her up to date on the Queen Elizabeth Scholar Program, which was instituted here in Canada in 2012 on the occasion of her 60th anniversary of the Diamond Jubilee. And to date, that's had 3,000 young Canadian students studying or working or on volunteer activities abroad, and international students studying here. And really, it's an indication of global citizenship at its best, and that will carry on as a legacy to what she meant to all Canadians.
Certainly, and her exemplary service of volunteerism. You've met her, and many of us haven't. So we'd love to know a little bit more about her. And I'm remembering a moment where the British press had a heyday over the fact that you broke protocol by walking her down the stairs. Would you tell me about that moment?
Well, it's a moment of both tradition and being somewhat constrained on the one hand, and then the personal graciousness of Her Majesty on the other. It was her 60th anniversary on the throne, and we had a reception at Canada House, the house of the Embassy of the High Commissioner in London. It opens on Trafalgar Square, which, when you have a celebration of some kind, you can have as many as 100,000 people in that square. In any event, we had unveiled a portrait to her, which was quite lovely, and we had made another presentation for the 60th anniversary on the throne, and we were proceeding down the steps out into Trafalgar Square. I was about a foot behind her, and there was a red carpet over the steps, and on the second last step there was quite a ripple in the carpet, and lo and behold, her foot was going directly towards that, and I thought, my heavens, she's going to trip. And I realized, you don't touch the Queen, but my gosh, I better steady her. And my mother's voice came into my ear, or so I thought, that, "Son, you better take that lady by the elbow, because if you don't and she falls, I'll never speak to you again." And so I took her elbow, and fortunately she steadied herself. She managed to ripple, and down she went. But the next morning, the British tabloid said you had a field day with this colonial bumpkin from Canada seizing the Queen. And midway through the morning, a nice message came from her private secretary saying the Queen simply wishes to advise the Governor General that it's wonderful to know that chivalry is not dead in the United Kingdom today. It's alive and well. So that's the Queen.
Thank you for giving us that smile on this difficult day for so many people. You also, I believe you were at William and at Prince William and Kate's wedding. You've had quite a few interactions. The Prime Minister described her as thoughtful, wise, curious, funny. How would you describe the Queen as a person?
Well, I think all of those adjectives, and it's interesting. She had several personalities. The one that we know her by would be the leader of servant, I think, and always being so dignified, and meeting so many different leaders from various parts of the world, of all stripes and all kinds, and always with a appropriate formality and the graciousness, and at least in her interactions with the Prime Ministers of the UK and the Prime Ministers of the realm, always there with good counsel and the wisdom that comes from experiencing an awful lot over a long lifetime. So that quality was there. But the other side of her were these personal characteristics of warmth, of thoughtfulness, of curiousness, and I would also say really a great sense of how you help public institutions work to serve all citizens. I mean, she was deeply interested in democracy and democratic citizenship and how you develop healthy societies. A moment ago in our conversations, we spoke about volunteerism. She was just so reinforcing of volunteerism, and her faith was such a rock for her. And her faith was not simply the Christian faith, and she was devout, but the notion that, virtually all of the great religions have at their core, in one way or another, the notion of do unto others as you would have others to do unto yourself, or love thy neighbor. And in her Christmas messages, she would always refer to a parable from the New Testament And her favorite one was the story of the Good Samaritan. Your listeners will know of that as the Samaritan was from a kind of hostile or enemy tribe to the Israeli people, and a Israeli merchant was set upon by robbers and beaten and left wounded in a ditch. And a Pharisee, a leader of the Israeli community, came by and looked at him and passed on quickly, and a scribe, another high priest, came by and looked at him and went quickly by. And then a Samaritan came along, someone from a hostile tribe or relationship, and immediately went to bind his wounds and then took him to an inn and cared for him until he was well. And for the Queen, that was the notion of love thy neighbor, but your neighbor is not just the person you know and share values with, but it's anyone who needs your help and care. And she really reflected that so much. We established a reinforcement of the Caring Canadian Award, which was a Governor General's Award when I was GG, and with her permission elevated it to we wanted it to be the Queen Elizabeth Medal for Volunteerism, and she said, please, that would be fine, but call it the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteerism, because she was very conscious of anything like this being sustaining over the decades and centuries. And for me, it was really such a wonderful thing that we have the Order of Canada and other honors that recognize our most distinguished citizens in terms of achievements that are in the newspapers or the media every day. But this was for the unsung heroes, and I think in the last year that I was GG, we awarded 1,000 of those across the country, and gosh, we should be doing 10,000 because every community have good volunteers. And I often judge the quality of a community by saying, what is your percentage of volunteers on a per capita basis? And if it's well above average, that community is thriving, and if it's below average, that community is generally pretty unsuccessful.
No, that's a really good way to judge it. And like you said, I mean, she led by example. She was a patron of over 600 organizations and charities. We really appreciate your perspective and your time, former Governor General David Johnston.
I just been with one thought about her patronage. On her Diamond Jubilee, her 60th anniversary, the Government of Canada made a gift of $10 million to honor her, and out of that came the Queen Elizabeth Scholars Program, which today has invested almost $100 million in 3,000 young Canadians going abroad for academic exchanges or volunteer work or internships, and then international students coming here. And this was her notion of global citizenship and how important it was that we develop that sense of young people, that they live on the planet Earth, and the interaction with other young people on the planet Earth makes for very good things. So that will be a legacy to her, and I really see that flourishing over the decades to come.
Certainly, and the ripple effect for those young people and then their families and their grandkids, and as it goes on, $100 million. Wow. Thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Now, out of all the countries in the Queen's realm outside the United Kingdom, Her Majesty visited Canada most often, a total of 22 times during her reign. Abigail Beeman looks at her visits to Canada and her connection and affection for our country.
True Canadian cheers greet the Princess. As followed by the Duke, she steps onto Canadian soil for the first time.
Queen Elizabeth's rich relationship with Canada stretched so long, during her first trip she was still Princess in 1951. Over the 7 decades that followed, the Queen made nearly 24 visits, seeing every corner of the country, urban, rural, and remote, and meeting all kinds of Canadians, drawing big crowds.
The Queen rarely says anything controversial, but she brings a great deal of excitement, and I think part of the excitement is because people actually don't know what she's thinking.
This is the little dress I wore.
Susan Sweeney Herman was 9 years old when she was selected to present flowers to the Queen in Quebec in 1959, a moment that stayed with her.
She was very, very sweet, a lovely smile, thanked me, for the flowers and fussed over them for a moment, and so I felt happy about that. And then off she went and shook more hands.
33 years later, she was able to arrange the same honor for her own 9-year-old daughter.
I took pen to paper, my best fountain pen, wrote a letter to the Queen's private secretary, not thinking anything would come of it, but 10 days later an envelope arrived in the mail with the royal insignia thanking me for my letter.
The Queen has been there for key moments in Canadian history.
Carolyn Harris points to 1970, Prince Charles and Princess Anne's first trip, and one of many times the Queen met with Indigenous peoples.
It was not only an opportunity to engage with Indigenous people in these regions and to visit areas that had never received a royal visit before, but it was a very clear statement of Canadian sovereignty over the Arctic.
The whole family was back for the 1976 Olympics in Montreal, watching Princess Anne compete on the British equestrian team. In 1982, Her Majesty signed the Constitution Act, signaling Canada's move to full sovereignty.
There could be no better moment for me, as Queen of Canada, to declare again my unbounded confidence in the future of this wonderful country.
A beloved queen, but the crown is not loved by all Canadians. Protesters in Quebec turned their backs to her in 1964.
She has said, and I think it's one of the remarkable statements she made during her long, long reign in this country, that she was not a fair weather friend. She was here not just for the good times, but also for the difficult times. And she has been here during difficult times and has responded to some of the difficult things.
A 3-province tour in 2010 would be Her Majesty's final visit.
I shall continue to take the greatest pride in being your Queen now and in the years to come.
Pride and a strength of connection from a head of state who represented stability, reigning for nearly half of Canada's existence since Confederation. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
Let's bring in our Abigail Beeman, who is live in Ottawa with more reaction to the Queen's death from the Prime Minister and others. Abigail.
That's right, and I think we want to start by hearing again some of the words from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as he spoke in Vancouver in the last half hour, if you want to begin with that.
As her 12th Canadian Prime Minister, I'm having trouble believing that my last sit-down with her was my last. I will so miss those chats. She was thoughtful, wise, curious, helpful, funny, and so much more. In a complicated world, her steady grace and resolve brought comfort and strength to us all.
She was, Abigail, the stability in this complicated world. And when you think about Britain as well, going through this change, a new prime minister, it's this timing, I mean, of this happening is leaving, I'm sure, a lot of Britons wondering what's next. Talk to us more about the reaction from this moment in history.
You know, that's right. And the Prime Minister went on in that statement to say that she was one of my favorite people in the world and he will miss her so. And you were really hearing that emotional and personal connection or personal side from the Prime Minister, someone who, you know, as has been stated before, has known the Queen since he was a small child. And he also mentioned in that statement his last sit down with the Queen and finding it hard to process that was indeed his last. I was on the trip with the Prime Minister when that meeting occurred, and it stands out in my mind, and as a point of reference, it was March of this year of 2022, and the Prime Minister was visiting several places in Europe. This was the month after the invasion of Ukraine. There's a photo of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau meeting with the Queen where the flowers in the background are blue and white, marking Ukraine, and that meeting stands out because the Queen had just recovered from COVID, and that was in fact her first in-person meeting at the time since recovering from COVID, and it was with Prime Minister Trudeau. So there was a lot of attention, or perhaps more attention than usual, around the world on that meeting because everybody was so concerned about her recovery and how she was doing. And here this photo emerged of her with Justin Trudeau showing that she was, you know, up to good spirits enough in order to have that meeting. And as we're hearing sort of some of these personal anecdotes or behind-the-scenes stories coming in, I wanted to flag one that came from former Prime Minister Paul Martin, who was, I believe, the first former Prime Minister to issue a statement this afternoon on the passing of the Queen. He notes that he was the 10th of 12 Canadian Prime Ministers during Queen Elizabeth's time, and talks about how he hosted the Queen and Prince Philip during the royal visit of 2005. And a part of the statement that I'd like to read to you to highlight, just noting that personal connection and the Queen's ability to connect with people and her memory, I think, is what stands out here. So the former Prime Minister Paul Martin writes, "At our first meeting, she was kind enough to mention her friendship with my parents, who had lived in London when my father served as Canada's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom during the late 1960s. It's difficult to express how much that would have meant to my mother and father, who were great admirers of hers." And Prime Minister Martin's statement goes on there. So you heard that in your conversation with David Johnston, just these moments of a person who really connected and had this standout ability to connect with people and have a personality that shone through while she stayed and remained neutral, as you talked about earlier in this special as well. So that is the statement, or part of the statement, from the Right Honourable Paul Martin. I also want to note that you spoke with Crystal about Operation London Bridge and the day of the funeral as it happens in London. I can share, if you wish, some information about what will happen here in Ottawa. Some information was put out a little earlier by the city clerk for the City of Ottawa, talking about what is also known as Operation London Bridge here in Ottawa to mark the day of the funeral. Here, there will be a gun salute. There will be a parade. That parade will end at the Christchurch Cathedral for an interfaith memorial service, which is by invitation only. And there will also be a fly past of CF-18s over Parliament Hill. And as I mentioned earlier, the last time you came to me, but if people are just joining, that flag at the Peace Tower on Parliament Hill is now at half-mast, and protocol states that it will stay at half-mast until sunset on the day of that funeral, again known as Operation London Bridge.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Abigail Beeman. And of course, the Union flag also lowered in London to half-mast as well. Thanks for telling us, Abigail, about what's happening in Ottawa. And I've been joined by Patricia Treble. She is a royal commentator. You've been writing about the royals for 20 years. We talked about Operation London Bridge, which you have in your hand right there. Just to get a little personal, you've devoted a lot of your career to this.
I have.
To writing about the royals. Queen Elizabeth has been the only queen that you've known. Tell me about that.
She's the only queen. I did the math. I love doing statistics. People around me laugh. And I did the math once, and more than 90% of the Canadian population has known no other head of state. She 90%. Is the queen. And she's so iconic that one of the leading German dictionaries, they have a word in German for queen. I think it's iconic. Don't get me at the accent. But for the queen herself, they created a second one, Die Queen, because she is simply, it only applies to Queen Elizabeth II. And your correspondent was talking about church services, and I think we're going to see them everywhere. My church, which is in Toronto, is a big church in Toronto, just announced a memorial service for the Queen tomorrow night. The Queen's Own Rifles will be attending. That is one of the regiments that the new Queen Camilla, she's the honorary colonel-in-chief. And I think you're going to see this. And it's following in the pattern of what happened with her father 70 years ago. And if, for anyone who's got relatives who were aware of what was happening, my mother was a nurse at the time, and she remembers all of a sudden the hospital, she was down in St. Catharines in Ontario, hospital got very quiet. She thought, that's odd. So she went out in the corridor, and there were these doctors and nurses, and they were crying in the corridor. And she said these were men and women who had fought in the war, who were hard-bitten people who, you feared them, and they were just openly crying for him. And I don't think we're going to see that now. I mean, he died when King George VI died when he was 56. Young, came as a shock. This is not a shock to anyone. I mean, I think the suddenness of it at the very end, the fact that she did an engagement 2 days ago, but she died with her boots on, which is, as somebody just texted me, and I thought, that's a good way to say it. But I think we're going to be seeing more and more of these reminiscences and more of these both official and unofficial remembrances of her. Because you've had a long, London Bridge is only the top level of what is going to be happening. Every city, every province is going to be doing something. The military is going to be doing something. They swear their allegiance to the Queen. They have to then swear their allegiance to the new king. But everything continues as it is. As somebody once said, the last breath of the old monarch is followed by the first breath of the new monarch.
And that's why, even though there hasn't been a coronation, we right away,
doesn't matter,
call him
absolutely
Charles III.
Absolutely.
So this is, like I said, you've devoted quite a bit of your life to writing about the royals. I mean, there's also though this feeling from a lot of people in our country about colonialism. There have been protests.
Absolutely.
Right? There have been boos for Prince William when he was here. How does that kind of fit into today? How is she remembered? Because it's for some, it's not just this legacy of service. It's more complex than that.
Exactly, because she's the embodiment of an institution that for hundreds of years was responsible. Everything is done in the Queen's name. Everything is done in the monarch's name. They were responsible for some of the worst atrocities in Canada, for some of the worst horrors. I mean, when residential schools were created and when they were founded, they were done in the name of the monarch, because she represents the state. And so I think there is, you talk about the service, but then you have to also reflect on what the institutions are and how, but also talk about how the institutions have changed. And I remember when Charles was just here and he was talking with Indigenous leaders about reconciliation. He was talking, and Mary Simon gave a number of really good, powerful speeches and said it's an ongoing process.
Right.
That you have to accept what's happened. You have to also incorporate it into how you're going to move forward. I mean, you can't just say, oh, that's the past. You can't say, oh, what happened back then. No, that doesn't work.
Right.
It has to keep going. And I think that is also part of what, in a way, makes a monarchy invaluable, is that there is just simply that continuity, that you have to accept. You can't just write, unlike the American system where you can just say, oh, that was the previous administration.
Right.
No, you have to accept good and bad, and you have to accept it the whole way down.
Let's take a look at this live shot together. Patricia, you see, people consoling each other. You see hundreds of bouquets of flowers there that are just lined up against the gate. I mean, reminiscent of what we saw when the Queen Mother passed, when Princess Diana passed. And also you see a child there who may not remember today, but will be told and maybe have pictures of what happened and is really witnessing history right now. We're going to bring in our Crystal Gamansing, who is at our London bureau for the very latest and what we're learning this hour. Crystal.
Thanks, Farah. Yeah, the images out of Windsor at the long walk leading up to the castle in Windsor is what you're looking at there. The gate after Prince Philip's passing, that you couldn't really even stand where those gentlemen are standing right there because there were so many flowers. So this is usually where palace officials will direct people who go to the main gates to Windsor Castle. They'll tell them, no, go to the long walk. And so this is where you'll see people coming just in droves to drop off flowers. When I was in Windsor for Prince Philip's passing, people talked about how the royal family is not just the royals. They're their neighbors. They see them out in the community. So the level of familiarity is very, very different in Windsor. So this is quite the scene. Farah, you mentioned seeing children there. You will see a number of kids. I remember for Prince Philip's funeral, mums taking pictures of their children saying, stand there, and I would talk to them about it, and they would say, I want them to look back on this and know that they were a part of it. So this is the scene that will play out at all of the castles across the UK, and it will be a very somber mood. I would not be surprised if the camera changed position to see people just standing there holding each other and crying, because there is just such a sense of family, really, especially in Windsor. So it's a very moving sight to see, and we get a little bit of a closer look at this location versus Buckingham Palace in London, just because the palace in London is the main home, the main working home. So that's often where you see the world world's media standing. It will be an absolute crush of people. And interesting, it's just, you know, the pictures we saw a moment ago of Buckingham Palace. I'm not sure if the control room could pull up that feed, but it was just 3 months ago that it was packed with people for the Platinum Jubilee celebration. The Mall leading up to Buckingham Palace just closed off, and just a sea of people celebrating. And even back then, even in June, everyone was talking about the fact that they wanted to be there because they didn't know how much longer the Queen would be around. So there's that sense of knowing, of understanding that eventually it was going to happen, and that's where we are right now. You're hearing a lot about the procedure and how the switchover is instantaneous, that we have now King Charles III, and one of the things that I can tell you is that there's a title change already. Prince William will take on his father's old title. He will be known as Prince William, the Duke of Cornwall, but also the Duke of Cambridge. So there's a name change there. And I think I can hear a little bit of the audio from the shot. I think they're doing some cheers there. So there is going to be this continuous honoring the past, but also ushering in the new king. And we're looking at a live shot here of King Charles III as he walks and takes part in some of the daily activities as the stand-in often for the Queen over the last little while. I want to play you one of the first politicians to address and pledge her loyalty and devotion to King Charles III was a new Prime Minister of Britain, Liz Truss. Take a listen to what she had to say not too long ago, just outside of number 10 Downing Street.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. We are now a modern, thriving, dynamic nation. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world.
I was just trying to get a better look at the emblem on the podium there that Liz Truss had given her speech from. Anything with the ER symbol. So we see those on the big red post boxes around the UK. Those will all be replaced for anything with Her Majesty, the Queen, the ER. All of those items will be replaced. And yes, that includes currency over the next short while and coming years. All of the money that has the Queen's image on it, those will all be taken out of circulation and replaced with King Charles III's image.
We have that memory from when we were all young of this currency and of her face, her image on our money. I mean, many roads here, hospitals, things are named after her. I just wanted to ask you one thing, and that was about your coverage during the Jubilee, during the Platinum Jubilee, Crystal. There was, on this Sunday, and I don't know if we have this image, but there was this very clear image of Queen Elizabeth, and beside her were the now King Charles III and Queen Camilla. And then on the other side, she had Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, and also the Duchess, Catherine, and their children, Prince George, Prince Charlotte, and Prince Louis. So there was this, it was almost symbolic. What did you make out of that? And what did the people of the UK make out of that image on that Sunday?
Well, it was a beautiful image and one everyone was hoping to see again. Of course, she was there for the opening day, and then she had missed a couple of the events because of poor health. So the fact that she took the balcony, that she gave a little wave in that very bright, popular color that she likes to wear, green, always known for those very beautiful, bright outfits that she had, giving a wave and a smile, that really warmed a lot of people knowing that she was there, that she was able to enjoy that final day. The fact that it was a smaller group on the palace balcony for the last day, a lot of people see that as a nod to the future, that it will be a slimmed down monarchy, that you won't see as many people on the balcony, that people's roles will be a little more defined as they try to update and modernize the crown and the work of the royals. That work has actually been ongoing for a while. You've seen the slow shift in duties and trying to keep things smaller. So some people read into that saying, you know, they didn't want Harry on the balcony, they didn't want Meghan on the balcony, but that was more of a direct lineage of the crown and the future of the monarchy, saying, you know, this is a monumental day for the Queen, but it was a symbol to what's coming next. And of course, that is in fact King Charles III. He will, if I'm not mistaken, be the oldest king for Britain, being a 73-year-old man as he now takes over the long duties that his mum used to perform, and we'll see if he performs them with the same rigor and dedication.
And it seems like the transition was very slow, very methodical, very thoughtful throughout the past few months. Crystal Gamansing, thanks for your coverage. We'll be coming back to you soon. And you're looking live at a shot there of all the flowers outside Windsor and people taking photos, remembering this moment in history, the death of Britain's longest-serving monarch. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II may also herald changes to the Commonwealth itself. Elizabeth considered it to be an important institution and to sustain what she saw as British and Western values of democracy, of human rights, of the rule of law, as you've heard before on this program. She spent a considerable amount of time and energy sustaining that institution. Our David Aiken reports the Commonwealth's future may be at a crossroad, along with quite possibly the very institution of the monarchy here in Canada.
The Commonwealth, as we know it today, was just 4 years old when a newly crowned queen spoke about her vision of the institution which would play such a central role in her long reign.
The Commonwealth bears no resemblance to the empires of the past. It is an entirely new conception built on the highest qualities of the spirit of man: friendship, loyalty, and the desire for freedom and peace.
Elizabeth saw the Commonwealth as a vital institution, one that had its origins in the British Empire, but in its modern form had become a community of 54 like-minded nations of equals.
That new conception of an equal partnership of nations and races, I shall give myself heart and soul every day of my life.
In many ways, the Queen is the Commonwealth. I mean, she is the one individual that links all of the now 54 states that make up the Commonwealth.
Elizabeth rarely missed the summit of the heads of government of Commonwealth nations and seemed especially pleased that at the age of 92, she was able to host the biannual summit in London.
It is a pleasure this time to welcome you to my own home.
The Commonwealth has often played an important role in pushing forward changes that would live up to Elizabeth's vision. And Canada would often be at the center of it, perhaps most notably when former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney led global efforts to end apartheid in South Africa, efforts that were often opposed by the British Prime Minister of the day, Margaret Thatcher.
So there are all sorts of examples of the Queen in that role as head of the Commonwealth being able to exert subtle diplomatic influence. And of course, one of the famous examples is the fight against apartheid in South Africa, where it was very clear that the Queen played a key role in keeping the Commonwealth together when British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had very different views than many of the Commonwealth Prime Ministers about how to address this issue.
Throughout the Commonwealth's history, Canadian governments have seen the institution as a place where Canada is influential, as one of the so-called senior dominions.
Canada can punch above its weight within the Commonwealth, and that same logic applies to a lot of these smaller states that just get lost in the shuffle at the UN or other truly universal organizations.
But without Elizabeth, the survival of the Commonwealth is an open question.
The Commonwealth has been so indelibly tied to Queen Elizabeth that it's very hard to think of it existing without her.
Elizabeth was head of the Commonwealth, but that title is not hereditary. Canada and other Commonwealth nations pick their own head, and at that 2018 summit in London, they voted to name Charles as Elizabeth's successor as head of the Commonwealth.
It is my sincere wish that the Commonwealth will continue to offer stability and continuity for future generations.
The Queen.
And it's not just the future of the Commonwealth, which may be in doubt with Elizabeth's passing. The future of the very monarchy itself in Canada may now be up for renewed debate. But those in Canada who wish to be rid of the monarchy will run straight into a constitution that is, for all intents and purposes, politically impossible to change.
For Canada to cut its ties with the monarchy or to become a republic with a presidential head of state or even a fully parliamentary republic would be a difficult task indeed.
Getting rid of the monarchy would require the unanimous consent of all provinces, the House of Commons, and the Senate, in a constitutional conference like no other.
There's no real appetite to go through the formal amending process.
And yet, a Canadian government, should it so choose, could all but remove the monarch from the country's official life, taking the image of a king or queen off of the country's money, for example, or ending the monarch's long-running appearances on our postage stamps. Ottawa could unilaterally remove any reference to the monarch in oaths taken by new citizens or in courts of law. The Air Force or Navy might no longer be the Royal Air Force or the Royal Canadian Navy.
I think it is important to recognize that when the Queen had her coronation, when she became Queen of Canada as part of her accession, we were fundamentally still a country that had very close ties to the United Kingdom.
A country that in the 1950s conceived of itself as largely white, male, power concentrated in Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto.
We had not gone through the revolution in multiculturalism, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, the emergence of Quebec as effectively a semi-autonomous state within Canada.
Elizabeth leaves behind a Canada fundamentally reshaped from the one she first visited in 1951.
It's a very different country, and one that may not easily slide into yet another monarch who happens to be the head of the United Kingdom.
Like with a lot of things, when the royal family transitions to Charles as its head, the status of the royals, including the Commonwealth, I think will be up for grabs.
And so, those are the choices that now face a new monarch and Canada. To renew or not to renew Canada's ties to the British Crown and to the Commonwealth of Nations. David Aiken, Global News, Ottawa.
I want to bring in Patricia Treble in. She has been a royal expert and writing about the royals for 20 years. And I'd love for you to weigh in on this, on the future of the monarchy. You just saw what David reported. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is an institution that has always evolved. It evolves very slowly. It evolves always a step behind. You never want to be too far ahead. So it's always slow. It's quite methodical. But look, when she became queen, you had really 6 members of the Commonwealth and everything else was empire. And now you've got the huge Commonwealth. And countries made up their own their decisions. Did they want to have the Queen as their head of state? Did they want to, when they became independent, or did they want to just have presidents? And she was happy with everything. And I think this is what we're going to see. There are now 15 realms. Barbados was the last one it went. Always been independent, always staying within the Commonwealth, but no longer wants to have the Queen as head of state. Canada is one of those 15. Will Canada change? I think is that things. It's a little bit difficult to change our constitution. The joke among a lot of people who follow the Crown is that we might have the monarchy when everyone else, including Britain, has gotten rid of it. I think there's going to be an evolution. I think we're going to end up with maybe a few countries retaining the monarchy. And it's really everyone to have their own decision. But what the Queen and what Charles have always said was, have the people make up their decision, have the people make up their mind. If there has to be a referendum, absolutely.
Right.
And they will celebrate. Charles came to Barbados when Barbados announced that it was giving up the monarchy.
Yeah, that probably was not an easy visit.
No.
Okay, thank you for that, Patricia. I want to bring in our Redmond Shannon, who's on the streets in Camden Town still, I believe. And Redmond, where it's raining, I can see. Redmond, I'd love to ask you on more of a personal level. I mean, you were born in Ireland, but you grew up in that part of the world. Talk to me about your thoughts today. You have a deeper connection than we may have here in Canada.
Quite the opposite, actually, Farah. I mean, the Queen, Ireland isn't even part of the Commonwealth, and the Queen plays no role in the Republic of Ireland, at least. She's head of state of Northern Ireland, of course. I would say a conflicted relationship with the British royal family, given the long and difficult history between the British Empire and Ireland. But on a personal level, of course, being a dual citizen, I'm a new Canadian, and in 2011 I had to pledge allegiance to Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada. So obviously that was an interesting moment for anybody, regardless of your politics and regardless of what you think of the royal family. Something like that is something you don't take lightly and something you do think about. And obviously in Canada there are mixed emotions about the royal family. In recent years we've seen perhaps less support than there has been in the past, but nonetheless strong support for the royal family. So yes, the royals, there's a different take on them no matter who you are. Different people have different takes, and here in London, of course, home of Buckingham Palace, home of the royal family, this is where I suppose people feel the closest to the Queen. What a week it's been here. You know, the United Kingdom started the week with a head of state named Elizabeth and a head of government named Boris, and it finishes the week with a head of government named Elizabeth and a head of state named Charles, and it's something else for people to take in. I spoke to a couple of people here on the street in Camden Town who both of them came up to me and told me what they wanted to say. They saw me with the camera and they wanted to express themselves. Take a listen, Farah.
She was part of my life. I'm 63 and I remember the Queen when I was, I think, from a child, and what a wonderful, beautiful, lovely Queen she was. What a great spirit.
We've always been brought up with a Queen, you know. God save the Queen, isn't it? That's the saying, the British saying. So kind of it takes the great out of Great Britain.
So that's a taste of how some people here are feeling this evening. It will be a long process over the next week and a half, perhaps weeks and months, as people get used to King Charles III and get used to the end of the second Elizabethan era, Farah.
You know, while I have you, let's talk a little bit about Ireland, because the Queen, you know, famously visited Ireland. I believe it was in 2011. What do you think the mood is there right now?
I think there's a lot of respect, particularly given that visit, Farah. She was the first monarch of the United Kingdom to visit Ireland since Ireland gained independence from the UK just over 100 years ago. So it took 90 years because of that difficult history. Think about that. How many monarchs have visited Canada over that period? And no monarch visited the neighbouring country to the UK during the first 90 years of Ireland's independence. So when she did go, it was very warmly received. I think people were very taken by her efforts to speak Irish Gaelic, a few words of Irish Gaelic at a state dinner. There will be, of course, a lot of Irish people who, given this difficult history, particularly given the Troubles over the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, how difficult that was, and the longer history between Ireland and the UK, won't be perhaps as effusive as others might be about mourning a British monarch. But I think, broadly speaking, there's a lot of respect for the way she carried herself. So even in a country with a difficult relationship to Britain, there is respect, certainly, for Queen Elizabeth II.
Okay, that is Redmond Shannon reporting from Camden Town. Thank you, Redmond, for that. And we are still looking at flowers at Windsor there. We've seen, as Crystal Gamansing mentioned, a lot of kids there being photographed by their parents, just to basically solidify and remember this moment in history that they will remember, and they will be told about if they don't remember for many years to come. And no matter how you feel about the Queen, her sense of duty was steadfast, especially when war was on her doorstep. Her Majesty became the first female member of the royal family to serve in the armed forces. Crystal Gamansing looks back at the Queen's service and her resilience during times of uncertainty.
A smiling young royal in uniform years before her coronation. This video recorded on Princess Elizabeth's 19th birthday. Images documenting one of the many ways she served her country and made history.
So there's a long history of monarchs leading their men into battle. If we think back to centuries ago, male monarchs. We have Queen Victoria, who was dressed in military garb, and she would go and observe her military forces.
Professor Juliet Pattison is a historian and author.
Princess Elizabeth was the first member of the royal family, female member of the royal family, to serve in the armed forces. And I think that's quite a unique and a precedent that she set.
That a future queen would serve her country along with conscripted women during the war was controversial. Initially, her father, the king, didn't support the idea. In fact, many upper-class families feared their daughters joining the auxiliary territorial service. The army had little panache, unlike the Women's Auxiliary Air Force or the Women's Royal Naval Service.
There were concerns that because women were seen as soldiers and because they were dressed in essentially male garb, uniform being traditionally a male form of clothing, that they would suddenly adopt the behaviour of men.
The princess returned to the palace every night, but during the day, she stood shoulder to shoulder with regular working-class women, getting her hands dirty, learning to drive, and repair trucks. But even before her stint in the army, young Elizabeth experienced war and its impact on families. While the royals always lived a protected life, German bombs didn't distinguish pauper from princess. Buckingham Palace was targeted repeatedly throughout the war. But on September 13, 1945, bombs were dropped on the sprawling royal home.
A delayed action bomb has fallen outside Buckingham Palace.
The king and queen were inside, but not hurt. It led to talk of their children being sent away. Canada was an option, but Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret ended up at Windsor Castle. Later that year, the 14-year-old princess broadcast a radio message to children.
All of us children who are still at home think continually of our friends and relations who have gone overseas, who have traveled thousands of miles to find a wartime home and a kindly welcome in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the United States of America.
While broadcasts and posing for photographs in uniform were very public displays of service, there were other more private moments.
Wild celebrations rocked the British capital after nearly 6 years of blood, sweat, and tears.
When victory was declared in Europe on May 8, 1945, and celebrations broke out, the young princess joined her fellow servicemen and women on the streets of London. But it was a secret, something she did after waving to the crowds from the palace balcony with her family and Prime Minister Winston Churchill. The relationship between the pair later changed when she ascended to the throne and met with Churchill weekly, but they were forever bound by their service in battle. That knowledge and understanding through action, says royal commentator Phil Dampier, is part of the reason so many held the Queen in high regard.
She comes from the wartime generation. She served in the war. Prince Philip, of course, fought in the war. And I think we've lost a lot of that. And that generation is a special generation. And I think their sense of duty and their sense of service is what kept them going.
That connection also kept others going in recent times. The Queen, seen as a stabilizing force, drew on her memories of the raids, the struggle, and the fear to soothe people during the pandemic. In a rare televised address during the pandemic, she spoke of her personal experiences and moved people when she quoted the famed wartime singer, Dame Vera Lynn.
We'll meet again.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
We'll meet again.
Calm and reassuring words from a woman who, for many around the globe, embodied duty and service, not in name, but with actions. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
And another interesting fact, when Queen Elizabeth became the Queen, women in the UK also didn't have the right to vote. So a lot has changed since her reign, and as we mentioned, the first female royal to serve. We're now joined by our Queen's Park Bureau Chief Colin DeMello in Toronto. He has reaction from Ontario's Premier Doug Ford. Colin.
Well, it was about 12 years ago, Farah, that Queen Elizabeth actually came here to Toronto. She came here to Queen's Park. She toured this building. It was named after her grandmother, Queen Victoria. But nevertheless, she took a tour of this building. She met with the then Premier Dalton McGuinty, unveiled a plaque outside the Ontario legislature, and of course, met with a lot of adoring people outside who had given her flowers and were here to snap a photo. As you can see behind me, this entire building is now in mourning. The flags of the UK, Canada, and Ontario are behind me outside of the Premier's office. They are draped in black. There is a portrait of Queen Elizabeth just outside the Ontario legislature. That too will be shrouded in black, and that black veil will hang over that portrait for a period of time until the new portrait of King Charles III will be officially received by the Ontario legislature. Inside the legislature, Farah, there was a moment of silence, a tribute to Queen Elizabeth. This is a government run by monarchists. They changed the rules inside the legislature so that once every month, God Save the Queen is officially sung here in the Ontario legislature. In the lobby of the building, there will be a book of condolence, and outside, of course, the flags have been lowered. And as you mentioned, Premier Doug Ford made a brief statement to recognize not only the legacy of Queen Elizabeth, but also to mark her passing. Take a look, listen to that statement now.
On this sad day, I join everyone across our province, country, and the world in commemorating the remarkable life of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen of Canada. Throughout her historic reign, she taught us the true meaning of selfless service and was respected and admired for her sense of duty and commitment to charity. After assuming the throne in 1952, Her Majesty led the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth through decades of changes, reigning as the longest-serving monarch in the history of our nation. Even with her many responsibilities, the Queen always held a special place in her heart for Canada, having made 22 official visits to our shores throughout her life. While I express my sincere condolences to the King Charles III, I also congratulate His Majesty on his accession to the throne of the United Kingdom and to wish him great success in continuing his mother's legacy.